Alright, in this section of 1-5, we're going to talk about alternate angles. So, what are alternate angles? Well, I would say alternate angles can be best described as a combination of two other types of angles. So they are a combination of vertical angles and corresponding. And let's go ahead and do this by a couple of things. Firstly, whenever you're given a diagram like this, now remember it says given that line L is parallel to line R, they like to number these angles like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are not values, these are just stating, hey, this is angle 1, or this is the position of angle 5. Now, let's say I use a different color here. Let's say I use my favorite little UT burnt orange. And I'm going to put a 1 right here. Okay, let's kind of follow the train here. We're going to say we're going to go to our vertical angle, which means I go across, and that's angle 3. And then we're going to go to our corresponding angle to angle 3. And I want you to look down here. Which one of these angles is corresponding to angle 3? Is it 5, 6, 7, or 8? And if you chose 7, you are correct. Because we see that 3, let me kind of use this weird green that I used in the last video. When you look at these 4 angles, 3 is in the bottom right. When you look at these 4 angles, 7 is in the bottom right. Okay? And so here's what we're really saying. We are saying that angle 1 and angle 7 are alternate angles. So let's go ahead and write that. I'll say that 1 is an alternate angle to 7. And I actually want to drop that down just a little bit. My apologies. 1 and 7. Okay, let's switch to a different color. Let's switch to this purple. And let's say I look at angle 4. Okay, so let's kind of follow these rules. We're going to look at the vertical angle to angle 4 and just say it out loud. Is the vertical angle 1, 2, or 3? And hopefully you said 2. Okay, so 2 is our vertical angle, and now we're going to go to our corresponding, and notice that when you look at 2, of the top 4 numbers, it's in the top right. So what number or what angle is corresponding to angle 2? It must be the angle in the bottom that's also in the top right of the bottom 4, which would be 6. And so our corresponding angle to 2 is going to be 6, which means that we have 4 and 6 are alternate angles. Now check it out. There are actually 2 types of alternate angles. So let me put this down here. There are alternate angles that are called exterior, and there are alternate angles that are called interior. Okay, and so what makes something on the exterior? Well, I want you to think of these 2 parallel lines as having both an inside and an outside. So for instance, we see here, let me use a different color. We see here, hey, this is the interior of the 2 parallel lines because it's in between. Let me just write interior a little better. It's in between, and then if we were to use just a different color, we could say, hey, this is on the outside, so that is a part of the exterior. I'll abbreviate it there. And this is on the outside of the parallel lines, so that is on the exterior as well. So if you were thinking about this, which set would be a pair of exterior angles? 1 and 7 or 4 and 6? And of course, if you chose, I'm wrong there. If you chose 1 and 7, then you would be totally correct. So we'll say that 1 and 7 are our exterior angles, which means, I'll use a different color here, that 4 and 6 will be our interior. Okay. Now check it out. Here's the very last thing we need to know, is that alternate interior angles are also congruent. So I can say that 1 is congruent to 7 and 4 is congruent to 6. Now notice there's actually two sets of angles that I didn't write down. I want you to pause the video and I want you to see if you can figure out what is the other set of exterior angles and what is the other set of interior angles. Go ahead, pause the video. What is the other set of exterior angles and the other set of interior angles? Okay. So notice, if we are talking about the exterior, I have to go to this other angle that's on the exterior, and I'll look at 2, and I'll go to my vertical angle, which I go across. We see 4, and then we ask ourselves, what is corresponding to 4? Well, 4 is in the bottom left, 8 is also in the bottom left, and it turns out that 2 and 8 are my alternate exterior angles. They are my alternate exterior angles. Okay, let's look at my interior angles over here. Let me switch back to this purple. Okay, and so notice the other interior angle that we haven't talked about is angle 3. Okay, so I go to my vertical angle, which is angle 1, and I ask myself, what is corresponding to angle 1? Well, it's in the top left, which means I also come down to 5, which is in the top left. And so it looks that 3 and 5 are also my other set of alternate interior angles. Hey, this is probably one of the trickier concepts to teach students for the first time. If you need to re-watch any of this, I would suggest you go back. But let's go ahead and do a couple of quick, easy examples. Pause it if you need to. Okay, so here's going to be example 2. Now let's just say I give you a set of parallel lines, and let's say that's a terrible arrow, and let's say this is angle 1 and let's say this is angle 3, and I'm going to tell you, okay, L is parallel to R, L is parallel to R, and angle 1 is equal to, let's say 112 degrees. Okay. Now notice, and I want you to find angle 3. Well, notice a couple things. 1, here is the exterior, so I'll write EXT, EXT. So I know that they are both on the exterior. And then the next question I would ask you is, looking at this line right here, are they on the same side? Like, are they both on the left of this line? Or are they both on the right? Or are they on opposite sides? And so you would probably say, well, wait a second, mister. 3 is on the left, angle 1 is on the right, and instead of using the word opposite, we use the word alternate. So here's what we're saying. We're saying that angle 1 and angle 3 are alternate exterior angles because they're on opposite sides of the line and they're on the outside of those parallel lines. And what do we know? We know that they are congruent. So if alternate exterior angles are congruent, well, then if angle 100 or angle 1 is 112, then angle 3 must also be 112. Now what if we wanted to extend this problem? What if I wanted to go one step further and say, hey, find the rest of the angles? Well, we're going to do just what we did in our previous problem, or in our previous video. We're going to say, hey, that's a straight line, and two angles on a straight line have to add up to 180. So we have 180 minus 112, which is 68. You can use your calculator if you need. So that's 68 degrees. And from here we can fill in everything else. Wait a second, if that's 68, then its vertical angle would be 68. And if this is the angle we're looking at, then its alternate exterior angle going to the outside and to the left now must also be 68. Okay, and then wait a second, if this is 68, its vertical angle must be 68. And the only thing that we're missing is if this angle is 112, well then its vertical angle must be 112. And if this angle is 112, then its vertical angle must also be 112. Remember, anytime you have these sets of parallel lines and you're given one angle, you can always find the other 7. It's pretty easy because all the vertical angles are the same and all the adjacent angles are also going to be the same once you find them. Alright, I've got one more example for you guys. Let's go ahead and move on. Last one. Example 3. Okay, now we're going to get really wild because I'm going to start kind of giving you some lines. They're not going to be like you would traditionally say, like straight up and down. Okay? And let's call this W, L, and P. That's a weird P. Okay. And here's what we're going to say. We're going to say that W is parallel to L, which is parallel to P. Okay. And we're going to cut them with a line. Now, I've been holding off on calling this line what it really is, but this line, in fact, let me even highlight it here with this orange color, we actually call it a transversal. So if you hear this word transversal, it just means a line that cuts across parallel lines. Okay, now let's go ahead and label some things. Let's call this angle 1. Let's call this one angle 2. How about we do this one right here? Let's call this one angle 4. And let's call this one angle 5. And let's call this one angle 8. Okay. Let's say I said, you know what? I know that angle 1 is equal to 120 degrees. And I want you to find the rest of these. Angle 2. I want you to find angle 5. I want you to find me angle 4. And of course I want you to find me angle 8. And let's even label these as we go. Okay, so let's kind of start here. And we know that we have 1 and 2. And are 1 and 2, are they congruent or do they add up to 180? Well, they'll be congruent because notice they are across from each other, so they are a set of vertical angles, which I will abbreviate. So if this is 120 degrees, then angle 2 must also be 120 degrees. Okay, now I want to compare angle 2 to angle 5. So let me get my burnt orange here. So here's angle 2, and notice to go from 2 to 5, they're both on the inside of their parallel lines, and they're on the opposite side of this transversal. So if they're on the inside and the opposite sides of the transversal, we know that 2 and 5 must be alternate interior angles. And if they're alternate angles, they must be congruent. So that would imply that angle 5 is 120 degrees. Now notice, let's see, what about angles? Let's use a different color here. What about angles 5 and 4? Well, this is actually a little bit trickier. They're not corresponding, they're not alternate angles, they're actually two angles on a straight line. So really and truly, we know that both angle 5 and 4 must add up to 180, which would mean that they are adjacent. Okay, they are adjacent. Or another way to say it is they are a linear pair. Okay, well wait, if 5 and 4 add up to 180, all I have to do for angle 4 is just say what's 180, here I'll write it right here, 180 minus 120, and of course we know that that will be 60. Alright, this brings us to our last set. Kind of starting to like this green a whole lot more. And we have our 4 and we have our 8. And notice, let's see, 4 and 8, they're actually not anything. So in fact, let's not do 4 and 8, let's do 5 and 8. And notice, if you have this parallel line here and this parallel line there, are 5 and 8, are they on the inside or are they on the outside? And so we'd say that they're on the outside, so they are on the exterior. And notice they're on opposite sides of that line. 5 is on the left, 8 is on the right. So they must be alternate exterior angles, which will still be congruent. So if 5 is 120, 8 must be 120. And there we go. Hey guys, check it out. I've just given you a review of vertical angles, alternate interior, adjacent or aka linear pairs, and alternate exterior, all on one diagram so you can see how it comes together. Alright, I'll see you guys in our next section.